Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining for our Women's Summit. So I'm Rachel West, and we have two amazing speakers today. So they're each gonna chat, and then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A after each speaker. So feel free to come with all of your questions. So I'm gonna give a little bit background on both of them. So we have Anna Blixt. So she'll be speaking about lessons learned in diplomacy and breaking cultural barriers. So as Consul of Sweden in Houston, Anna is the head of mission and leads the work in further establishing the Swedish presence in Texas. Along with offering consular services, this involves engaging in key sectors like space, energy, tech, and life sciences. Anna's diplomatic career has previously included heading the Swedish Embassy's division for the EU Common Security and the Defense Policy in Stockholm, and acting as the first secretary to the Swedish mission to NATO in Brussels. Prior to her appointment as Consul General in August 2025, Anna served as the Director and Deputy Head of the Department for Disarmament, Non-Proliferation, and Export Control in Sweden's Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Stockholm. So everyone give it up for Anna.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak. So I don't know how many of you that actually know what a consul general of a country does. Okay. I would be surprised if y'all knew that, because that would be kind of weird. So just a few words. So basically a consul general like me, the consul general of Sweden to Texas, in very simplified terms means the ambassador of a country to Texas. So of course my ambassador is up in Washington, D.C., the capital, but in specific countries that are big or important, or like the US, which is big and important, we also have consulate generals to take care of Swedish interests in different parts of the country. So the government decided to establish a consulate general in Texas last year. If you are in Texas, you understand why that's way too late. You know, we should have been here years ago, because Texas is the 7th or 8th largest economy in the world. It's such a dynamic region. You mentioned the sectors where we work, but there's so much more. So I'm glad that we are here. We should have been here years ago. So when I came here in September last year, my mission was to establish a mission. So I arrived and there was nothing. I mean, not really fair, because we have had fantastic honorary consuls of Sweden that have worked promoting Sweden and Swedish interests basically in their free time. And we still have a fantastic one in Dallas, and she's here today, Helene. But we had an office space, and that was it. So sometimes when I'm in that mood, I speak of us as a startup. You know, we came, we had an idea, we had to roll up our sleeves and get started. So we had to get Wi-Fi, we had to get computers, a bank account. And fast forward 7-8 months, we are now 7 people working out of a great office in Houston, covering the whole state of Texas, and it's great to be also coming to Dallas once in a while. And we have had a big inauguration with the Swedish Foreign Minister and the Crown Princess of Sweden, and we're ready to work. And what we do is we offer consular services. We support Swedes here in the state who live here and who come to the state if they lose their passports, so they need new passports or kinds of certificates. And if there's an emergency, we will of course also be of assistance. And then our job is to promote Swedish exports, investments, innovation, connections between Texas and Sweden. So I have the greatest job, basically. And then, you know, perks come with it, like speaking to an audience such as this. And I chose the topic lessons learned in diplomacy, right? Because what other topic, I mean, all the topics were great, but it seemed like that one spoke to me in particular. So what kind of lessons do you draw from 25 years in the Swedish Foreign Service? this will not be life-changing, I fear, but rather kind of a sum up of some of the things that I've definitely learned as a person and as a female leader in a very male-dominated world, because diplomacy still is. And I've spent most of my 25 years working on security and defense, and that is very male-dominated still. So the first lesson is, of course, that diplomacy is about relationships. It's about relationships between states, relationships with organizations, with cities, with corporations, and not least with people. So if you're not a people person, diplomacy is probably not for you. Because you cannot be effective in your job if you're not interested in people. A lot of my job is speaking to people, but most of it is about listening. So if you're not really into hanging out with other people, then maybe being a diplomat is not for you. You can then be a perfect analyst or some other kind of job supporting diplomacy, but it really is about talking to people, listening to people, understanding, you know, what drives them and what are their interests. It's about making those connections. And the second lesson learned is it's all about understanding what drives another actor's behavior, right? What's the reason behind it? Whether it's a multinational, multilateral negotiation, what drives this particular actor in this particular moment? What's the outcome? But it's also, if you're speaking to a Swedish company wanting to establish itself here in Texas and create hundreds of jobs in the state, what drives that behavior, and what can you do to facilitate an outcome that's positive for that company or positive for both of us? So you've got to understand not just the history of a country or of an actor, but also the culture, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Sometimes it's also very good to understand the personal motivation, especially when you deal with authoritarian regimes, which are quite often driven by personal motivation to cling to power or to enrich themselves, basically. And really, like, these are no trademark secrets that I'm offering. So the third one is preparations. The importance of being prepared. That goes for everyone. If you want to have a good outcome, you've got to be prepared. You can't just show up and wing it. I mean, sometimes that does work, especially if you're sent somewhere to talk about your country. You can do that, I guess. You can wing it, but it's always good to be prepared, but expect the unexpected. Sometimes you also have to be completely flexible. I've walked into meetings understanding that this is not the meeting I thought it was, and these notes are about something completely different from what I'm about to talk about. And this country is not China, this country was Sierra Leone. Okay, well then, unless you have a very quick staffer, you just got to wing it, but you have to be prepared. In the ways that you can. The fourth lesson is you have to stay curious. I guess that goes for any profession. Diplomacy is lifelong learning. One day you can work on space issues, like I did last week. I was out in Austin watching a rocket being tested. An engine for a rocket being tested. And today I'm here speaking about climate and the environment. You got to stay curious. And with developments the way they are, whether it be situation in the Strait of Hormuz or AI, you got to stay curious and not just get stuck in your own ways and in your own specific interests, but rather read about things that are not within your portfolio, but that might enrich you. Because every day is something new. And the good thing about being a diplomat is that every 3 to 4 years, you get to do something completely different. So before I came here, I was the nuclear weapons director. And now I do trade and investment promotion. So it's a bit of a shift. But, you know, every day is a new day. The fifth lesson is about, and here is where I'm really excited to listen to you afterwards, because it's about communications, right? What I do for my country has a lot to do with branding and storytelling. So the way that we communicate and what we communicate will, of course, have a very, very important impact. But communications is also about building trust with a community, building trust with another person. And of course, building trust takes a long time, and erasing that trust takes a second. So that's something we always have to be very mindful of, the way that we communicate. And so many times there's reality and then there's perception. And you got to be aware that both of those issues will play into a negotiation or, a conversation. And speaking about trust, diplomacy is long-term. It's not. How many of you have seen that show, The Diplomat, on Netflix with Kerry Russell? Isn't that a great show, except for her hair? Yeah. Her outfits are great, but the hair, what's with the hair? No one looks like that. So diplomacy in real life is nothing like that. We don't fly fancy jets. And if you're a US ambassador, you got to be confirmed by Congress before you take on a post. Anyway, it's a great show. But you might get the impression that diplomacy is about the short-term game, these meetings and making a deal or something. No, diplomacy is about long-term. It's about strategic objectives. Sometimes things can go really quickly, especially if you're in a warlike situation. For instance, when Russia invaded Ukraine, when there was the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, of course, there were very important sort of short-term objectives and short-term consequences, but mainly it's a long-term situation for us, and an existential one. Of course, but it's long-term. So you got to find those connections, build those relationships, build trust, kind of focusing strategically on what you want to achieve to pursue your country's objectives. But also, of course, not miss opportunities when they arise. You can have a great plan, but you got to be willing to kind of adjust your route along the way. So the seventh lesson learned is it's all about compromise. Diplomacy is not a zero-sum game, and it's not about winning, because that means that someone lost. So you want to find an outcome or a solution or a situation where both parties are happy or equally miserable, but at least they can agree on the outcome. So I think that's important, and also that no side has been humiliated. That's very important. And the eighth point is, in the world of government affairs, there are lots of rules and regulations, and it's really important to follow them. I wouldn't dream of not following them, but you also got to be creative within within the box. And that's where I love speaking to innovators and people working in the startup sphere, because you guys are creative and you've learned to navigate kind of not only within the box, but outside the box. And there's so much we can learn from each other. So even if you work in a rules-based environment, there's still a lot of scope for creativity. So finally, I want to say one thing about breaking the cultural barrier. So I don't like breaking things. Maybe that's where I differ with startups. I don't like breaking barriers. It's not about that. It's about understanding them, I guess, and understanding the cultural context. So when I'm new in a country, I tend to see I'm a guest. So I'm the Swedish government representative in Texas, which means that I'm a guest. So what I want to do instead of breaking things is to understand them and realize certain things I might not agree with and certain things I might not be able to change, but I can understand them. So it's important to learn about the context and about the customs and about the things that work and don't work. So Swedes travel a lot. A lot of Swedes have been to the United States and feel that, yeah, we understand America. We know America. That's not true. We think we do, but there are certain things we need to understand. For instance, Swedish companies, and I'm looking at my Swedish friends over there, could improve when it comes to pitching their ideas to, for instance, VCs. We could be quicker getting to the point, and we could also be a bit more courteous because, in the US, you ask, how is your day? And I like your shoes. And Swedes don't necessarily do that. We're a bit more insular. So even if we feel that we understand the US and we've traveled here, there are things about US culture and especially about making business in the US and in Texas that we as the Consulate General can help explain so that things run a bit more smoothly. So I didn't speak about what it's like being a woman in a leading position and in a male-dominated world of diplomacy and security policy, but we can talk about that later.
Thank you so much. Everyone give her a round of applause. So now we're going to transition to having Hope speak, and then we'll do a Q&A after. So Hope Shimabuku knows that behind every patent is a story of invention, persistence, and the people bold enough to build something new. As Regional Director of the USPTO's Southwest Regional Outreach Office, Hope champions the inventors, entrepreneurs, and creators shaping our region's future. A mechanical engineer turned intellectual property attorney with nearly 3 decades of experience, she's held senior IP roles at Xerox, BlackBerry, Procter & Gamble, and Dell before bringing her expertise to the federal government. She was the first Asian American chair of the IP law section of the State Bar of Texas, has been named one of DCEO's 500 most powerful business leaders in the Dallas Business Journal's Top 40 Under 40, and has even made a cameo as a casting call guest for Shark Tank. As a proud native Texan, UT Austin engineer, and SMU-trained lawyer, Hope has spent her career opening doors for innovators, for women, and for the next generation of stories turning into impact. Please join me in welcoming Hope.
Thank you. You made me sound awesome. Thank you. So, good afternoon, and I am thrilled to be here today. When I was growing up, I thought everyone had an astronaut visit them once a month at school. I grew up in Houston, Texas, right by the Johnson Space Center. My mom worked as a computer programmer on the Apollo missions. And one of the fondest memories that I had growing up was standing outside our schoolyard as the space shuttle on its return flight from California back to its home in Florida, it would do a salute to Mission Control. So what it would do is it would circle our school district in the salute, and we would stand outside and wave at the space shuttle as it came by. My childhood was surrounded by technology and was profoundly influenced, as you can imagine, by NASA. As well, my dad was an engineer for the oil and gas industry. So I was constantly surrounded by the innovation, the technology, the technologists, and the discoverers and the inventors of the world. And as a result, I went to engineering school and worked for 6 years as an engineer. I made Sunny D, Hawaiian Punch, and Dell computers. After that, I went to law school and became an IP attorney, and then 10 years ago, I joined the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Today, I have the privilege of talking to you about the power of storytelling in branding. And as I just started, I gave you the story of how I began and my background. Your stories don't have to be complicated. It can be about you, and each of you have a story. And it is a unique story because each of you have had a different path getting to where you're at. Now, in the world of intellectual property, it can be super duper complicated. How many of you know what the difference between a patent, a trademark, a copyright, and a trade secret is? All right. Some of you are awesome in that. And most people, unless you are an intellectual property attorney, you don't know what it is. And it can be very, very complicated. And so as a result, I spend a lot of my time telling stories and stories of innovation. Let me tell you a little bit about my story or my journey of innovation just today. So this morning, I woke up and I looked at my iPhone to see what time it was. iPhone, or the Apple company that made the iPhone or the iPads, was founded by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the two Steves. They started a company that was started with the Macintosh computers, and then from there it developed into the iconic brand that we see now today, which is symbolized by the apple, a white apple with a bite taken out of it. As I continued to get ready this morning, I was putting on my makeup. And then I started thinking about the iconic brand, a Dallas brand here, Mary Kay. And so Mary Kay, for those of you who don't know, was born in the city of Hot Wells, Texas. She learned resilience from her mom, as well as working at a restaurant long hours, as well as taking care of her dad, who was sick. She married young, had 3 children, and worked as a door-to-door salesperson while her husband served our country in World War II. After a while, though, she got very frustrated with the work environment. She kept getting passed over because of her colleagues who were surpassing her, and she wasn't really getting anywhere despite doing just as good a job, making the same amount of metrics and hitting those goals as everyone else, but kept getting overlooked and passed over for promotions. So, as a result, at the age of 45, with a $5,000 investment from her son, she just decided to start a cosmetics business called Beauty by Mary Kay, now known as the Mary Kay Corporation. Her first product was a basic treatment spa set with a pink palette of eye and lip colors, blush, mascara, and pencils. And as many of you know, the pink color is the classic trademark color of Mary Kay. In fact, it's so popular that those who are top sellers of Mary Kay products get what? The pink, that's right, the pink Cadillac, and that is driven around. Today, Mary Kay has over 800,000 consultants. Her company owns 1,700 patents and over 400 trademarks, and has contributed, which is a big part of Mary Kay's brand, contributed $230 million to charitable organizations. Additionally, as I continued to get ready in the morning, I started to put on my jewelry. And so today, I actually put on some earrings from Kendra Scott. Kendra Scott was born in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and she didn't move to the Houston, Texas area until she was 16 years old. She attended Texas A&M University, but had to drop out at the age of 19 to move to Austin to take care of her ailing stepfather. At that time, she opened her first business, which was called the Hat Box, and it specialized in comfortable hats for women who were going through chemotherapy. After that, in 2002, that is when she actually founded her jewelry business, in which her first collection was started with just $500 in her spare bedroom with her oldest born, and so she would be making the jewelry as her oldest was napping. She had to walk door to door initially to sell her product, but then she got a big break in 2005 when she was chosen to accessorize at Oscar de la Renta's Spring 2006 runway show. And in 2008, she actually hit a wall when she almost lost all of her business because of the financial crisis in the area. But Nordstrom's put in a huge order during that year and saved her. And because of the exposure, it allowed her to continue to build her business and expand to where it is today. In 2010, she was able to open her first store in Austin, Texas, and today she is a $1 billion brand, and she owns also a number of patents and trademarks. So storytelling. Each of these wonderful women and men have all produced a great product and a great brand that we actually all recognize, and it's based on the stories that they have told. So the question that I have for each of you is, what is your story? It doesn't have to be complicated. As a matter of fact, it's simpler to be able to tell complicated things in stories like I just did this very moment. So I encourage you, look at what your story is. What is your story? Doesn't have to be complicated. tell me what your story is going to be about yourself or your brand. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're going to open it up to the floor for a few questions before breaking out into speed dating. So if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and we'll call on you.
What do you see as the biggest opportunity in Texas for Swedish food? I love Sweden. Love it.
Thank you. I swear that was not a planted question. Thank you. So the biggest opportunities, I mean, it's hard to say just one big opportunity. I'd say that the entire, the business climate and the way that things are moving in Texas create enormous opportunities, whether it's in the green transition or the development of the data centers or in life science or in the space ecosystem, or basically there's lots going, or in the creative businesses. There's so much going on that this is really the place to be. So if you're a bigger company wanting to come here, there's opportunity. If you're a smaller company, if you're an innovator with a great idea, why not come to Texas and scale it up? Because everything's bigger in Texas. Not the funding.
VC funding is still on the coast.
Still on the coast, but I think, for Swedes, we understand the coasts and we are at the coasts, but there's so much in between. So I think there's so much here, there's so much opportunity, and it's not that well known back home. So part of my job is to, my job is to explain Sweden in Texas, and that's in a way easier than explaining Texas in Sweden, but we're gonna try.
Any other questions? You and then you. Yeah, go for it.
You mentioned that you don't like breaking barriers. Sometimes, especially if you're the only female in a very male-dominant industry. I'm in nuclear, so you have no choice to break the barrier. So, can you elaborate more on that, and when for you it's okay? I know you don't like it. I don't like it either, but I have no choice to do that. So.
It's a good question. So sometimes referring to I don't necessarily like the term breaking barriers, or actually I don't mind the term. It's just that sometimes if you're a diplomat, it's difficult to do that because you're a guest in an environment, and I'm not an activist. So you have different roles, and sometimes it might be your job having to break a barrier, right? But me as a diplomat, it's not necessarily the thing I try to do when I get to a country and I don't agree on its policies. I try to, fix it. I might try, but it's also about being, working long term. I mean, for me, I've certainly tried, and this in my career working back home in Sweden, I certainly tried to break barriers or actually try to protest against and work against, and also with others to try and change some of the rules that have not been very good or that have been impeding, my career or the way that I want to do things. But so it depends on where you sit. As a diplomat, I don't necessarily like breaking things, but as a civil servant or as a, if I'm doing something else, I don't mind throwing through a few stones at the glass ceiling to have it crack. I'm fortunate to be Swedish. So in Sweden, there's a lot of equal opportunity, which means that you can have a great career, you can also have a great private life, because, we have free childcare, free school, 480 days of parental leave, and so on. So it makes things a bit more easy to try and, break through and at the same time have a functioning life on the side.
You had a question?
Yes, my question is for Hope. You deal in a great deal of complexity in your own professional life, trademarks, patents, and so on. Do you have any guidance on finding, in the midst of the complexity, the thread of the story and helping those be carried forward? How did you do it? And what would your guidance?
Wow, that's an amazing question. And so You're right. I mean, I think it is super complicated, but I think the key that I would say is find what you are passionate about and what you absolutely love. Right? There are a lot of complexities, but there are also a lot of subject matter experts so that you don't have to get yourself caught in the morass and get yourself into the very, very complicated. You are a subject matter expert in whatever you're in, right? Whether it's technology or whether it's in business, and you're going to be really good at that. And so if there are areas that, you're not so good at, I hear the story about, oh, you should really work on your weaknesses, which is true, right? You can kind of understand it, but sometimes is it worth your time to really understand that completely? Because there are lots of other people who do understand it completely, so you may just need to know that much so that you can speak intelligently about it and then kind of understand how it works. But otherwise, leave the complexity to someone else and let them be the subject matter expert in that, and you be the subject matter expert of what you're really good at.
Yes. Go.
I have a question for you, Hope.
Oh, okay.
Why did you decide to leave for the public sector?
So that's a really great question. And so for me, just like being a diplomat, right, being an attorney, networking is a big part of my job. And for me, I was working in the private sector for a number of different companies, and the opportunity came up in which they were opening up a brand new office in the Dallas area. And it is with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and it was an organization that I deal with every day in my practice, because that's what I do as an intellectual property attorney. And so I actually was sitting on a panel with the then general counsel of the USPTO, and she said, "Hey, Hope, we're opening up an office in Dallas." And I said, "Yes, we're all very excited that you're opening up a Dallas office." And so she actually encouraged me to apply for this role. And I had actually never thought about it, but the thought of being the first head of the first regional office in Texas, actually it'll probably be the only regional office in Texas, but that's beside the point. But the thought of working in an organization that I am in contact with day in, day out, and then really to be able to serve my country in a very different role. I think that people don't realize that you can serve your country, not necessarily in the military, but in other capacities as well. But to be able to serve my country in this capacity, in a role that I'm in every single day, and also to be the first regional director of a brand new office was just an exciting opportunity that I have loved ever since I started 10 years ago.
Amazing. Well, if you have any additional questions, come find our speakers after the end of this event. We're about to transition and do speed dating, but first just give it a round of applause for our lovely speakers.